A January thaw before the coldest air of the year unleashes across the eastern two-thirds of the United States. How can you prepare for this brutal cold? We have all the answers next at the Weather Farm. A winter storm is going to form across the central plains that's going to spread rain and snow to the Ohio Valley this coming weekend. How can you be prepared for it? We have the answers coming up. Prepare for next week as the coldest air of the season is in store for most of the eastern two-thirds of the United States. As we begin our Wednesday, we have an area of disturbed weather in far southern Texas, bringing light rain showers there. Most of the eastern half of the United States is dominated by high pressure. You woke up to temperatures that range from 20 degrees below zero to below zero temperatures all the way down towards Kentucky. In those lake effect snow bands, we still see a little bit of snow across the Northeast. Areas of British Columbia are being impacted with rain along the coast and heavy mountain snows. And California is still impacted by those wildfires, and that is expected to continue as an area of high pressure is moved out of Utah towards Colorado, but still sending those winds downsloping into Southern California. As we move into our Thursday, not much is changing. That area of high pressure is still centered across parts of Colorado. We have a little bit more snow in parts of Alberta moving into northern Saskatchewan. We have some ice mixing in central Saskatchewan, just reflective of how warm it has been across the Canadian prairies, especially the western prairies, during this month of January. We have a clipper system that's diving along a trough that's digging across the eastern half of the United States. This will bring 1 to 2 inches of snow to places like Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio for our Thursday. And along the Gulf, we continue to see scattered showers making their way through the panhandle of Florida. Now let's take a look at those wildfires in California. We are now up to 5 major fires that we are watching at this time of the recording of this video. We have the Alto fire out towards Ventura. That's about 50 acres. And we have the Palisades fire, the Hertz fire, and the Eaton fire. Those are the 3 that have been burning for nearly 1 week plus. They are the ones that are consuming the majority of the acreage in Southern California. And another one out towards Riverside, the Scott fire. That is becoming one that we are watching. At this point, we're nearing 41,000 acres burned. We are up to 23 fatalities, and over 12,000 structures have been destroyed by these fires. And taking a look at those winds, Tuesday the winds aren't going to be too bad. Generally 30 to 40 miles per hour where these reds are, and north and east of Los Angeles. But by the time we get into Wednesday, those winds are ramping up very quickly. 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts are likely across most of Southern California. And then by Thursday, those winds do calm down. We don't see any precipitation in the forecast, but the calm winds will help the firefighters and first responders get a handle, hopefully, in containing some of these fires. Let's take a look at this system. Friday, we don't see a lot of activity, but we do see a low ejecting out of Colorado into the Central Plains. That's going to start to pull Gulf moisture northward and set the stage for heavy rain from Kentucky into Indiana, into Tennessee, and to the deep south. Some of these storms could get severe by the time we get to Saturday afternoon. Snow on the far northern fringe, not a significant snowstorm, at least what the last few model runs have shown with the GFS. So this is something we will continue to watch. As we look at the European model here, it has a similar setup. It is about 3 to 6 hours slower in developing this low. So by the time we get to Friday afternoon, Friday night, that low is beginning to develop and spread rain out ahead of it. It does introduce more of a mixing across parts of Illinois, Indiana, and into Ohio on Saturday, whereas the GFS doesn't. So that's definitely going to be something that we are going to be watching to see exactly where that is. Because the European is about 3 hours slower, it's allowing that colder air more time to get into the system and turn that rain into the snow, mixed precipitation. And here we can see it. So here's the 546 line. There's the 540 line, the one we look at for rain-snow differential. So as we look here through Illinois, it's all rain by the time early Saturday morning. But as that 540 line starts to dive south, we're going to switch some of that precipitation over to a mixed precipitation and eventually snow. The heaviest snow with this system is going to be north of I-70 and up towards Michigan, far northwestern Ohio, and in the north, just east of Lake Erie. This is where we could see 2 to 4 inches of snow. Obviously, in those higher mountainous areas of West Virginia, areas off of the lake where we get that lake-enhanced snowfall, we're going to see higher snow totals with this system. Nothing like what we saw across the Ohio Valley a couple weekends ago, but it's still a system to watch, still 72 hours out, and there could be some changes in the models as we go forward. So the big story is going to be after we get through this weekend's rain and snow event through the Ohio Valley into the Northeast, it's the bitter cold. Monday morning, we will see widespread 20 to 30 degrees below zero, teens across the Central Plains, 20s all the way down to the Gulf Coast. The real warm spot is going to be along California coast, where the lows are going to be in the 40s and 50s, even going into our Tuesday morning. That core of the cold air continues to move east and south as we get into Tuesday morning. The cold air across Canada has moved into Quebec, 30 degrees below zero, but here in the Ohio Valley, we could see sub-zero temperatures at night. But by the time we get to Wednesday, we see a warmer pattern across the Central Plains. The core of the cold air has moved east, 46 below potentially across northern Quebec. I know here at the weather farm, we have chickens out in the back, the property, and it's been so cold here that I swear, instead of laying eggs, they've been laying ice cubes. Thursday morning, temperatures are moderating. These are more seasonal low temperatures for most of the United States, the exception being far Texas, where we're going to see continued cold weather as we go into next weekend. And we see that cold air, again, reloading. We had the reprieve on Thursday, but it's reloading for another jab of Arctic air across the eastern half of the United States as we get to Friday morning, with sub-zero temperatures across parts of Minnesota, 25, 30, 35 degrees, stretching from Manitoba through Ontario to Quebec as we get into next Friday morning. And if we put all of our weather maps into motion, starting with Martin Luther King Day, an area of snow through the Rockies, but we see an area of low pressure, and this particular model wants to set up some kind of storm across far southern Texas, bringing rain and then eventually mixed precipitation and even snow as far south as the tip near Brownsville, Texas. The model also wants to generate a low pressure system off the Carolina coast, bringing a storm there by the time we get to Thursday the 23rd. Out west, it is completely calm, but there's that big system making its way up the east coast as we get into the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. High pressure Arctic air moves in for the following weekend, and it has been a very cold January across most of the eastern 2/3 of the United States. So this is a rankings map of temperatures. So the higher the number, and this goes back 133 years, from 1893 to 2025. So the higher the number, the colder this start to January has been compared to any other January in that area's recorded history. And so we see for most of the eastern 2/3 of the United States, we're in the 100s to 1-teens, meaning this ranks as the top 20 or 30 coldest January so far. Across the northern plains, it's a little bit more in the middle, in the 60s and 70s. However, out west, we're in the low 30s and 20s, meaning this is one of the warmest starts to a January in the 133-year history that this data set is available. So places like Las Vegas, you're the top 15 warmest. Northern California, 14th warmest start to a January. The only exception to our cold in the eastern half is far northern Maine, where you're about the 40th warmest start to a January, even down toward Boston, about the 50th, 60th warmest January to a start. But that cold extends all the way down into the deep south. Jacksonville, you're in the top 10 coldest starts to a January, down into southern Texas as well, top 25, top 30 coldest Januaries. So this is just a sign of the persistent pattern that has existed and will continue to exist as we move through the next 10 to 12 days across January. This is our pattern right now. We have an area of high pressure that is just to the east of Greenland. It is allowing the colder air to spill down into the United States, especially across the Central Plains up to the Great Lakes. As we get to next week, that area of high pressure off of Greenland continues to move further east. It's allowing the core of the cold that we saw across Quebec, where we saw minus 40, minus 45 degree temperatures. That core of the cold is going to move to the southern tip of Greenland. It's still going to funnel cold air into the eastern half of the United States, but we have ridging building across the Gulf of Alaska into Canada again. And so this is going to allow a pattern change to start to develop as we get into those last few days of January. That ridging is going to continue to spread over the northern provinces of Canada through the Yukon, Northwest Territories, the Nunavut, into Alaska. So we're going to see above normal temperatures. Greenland is going to see considerably below normal temperatures during the last few days, but that strong low is going to allow the ridging to move into the tropical Atlantic. And by the time we start into February, there are now hints that even that core of the cold near Greenland is going to relax. The core of the cold in British Columbia will relax a little bit. That polar jet is going to lift a little bit further north of the Canadian border, and it's going to keep most of Canada near normal or cooler than normal for those first few days of February. And what it's going to allow it to do is to start February is more of a zonal flow across the lower 48. So we're going to have warmer than normal temperatures moving from west to east as we begin the first few days of January. This is still about 24 to 28 days out from now. A lot can change, but we are starting again to see a transition from the persistent cold patterns that we've been seeing through January to a more warmer pattern than normal for the lower 48 as we move into our February. This is something we're going to definitely keep our eye on. We will bring you the latest information as these models get updated each and every week. Well, we hope we've prepared you for the upcoming weather that's going to impact the Ohio Valley this coming weekend and the brutal cold that is going to impact the Central Plains. Will there be a storm in the Gulf or the Carolina coast the following week? Still a lot to be determined. Check back again soon at the Weather Farm.